guys. It's Miami Knight, your Master Grief Educator and Trainer and Executive Producer and host of It's the Miami Knight Show Grief Talk, coming to you today with our final podcast for the year. That's right, our final podcast for the year. We're actually now in season 3. We've had an amazing year, and I just want to kind of recap and do a review of 2020 with all of my Grief Nation listeners, my very loyal fans that have stuck with me throughout this year, no matter if you have subscribed to our channel. And if you have not subscribed to It's the Miami Knight Show Grief Talk Facebook a group, also our SoundCloud podcast channel, our iTunes channel, and also our YouTube channel, It's the Miami Knight Show Grief Talk. Please subscribe and comment and like and share our content. We have really been active this year in getting the word out. I do have some data here, even though we only have 71 subscribers, but it's up this year by 62 new subscribers for the year of 2020. I have currently 228 hours of watch time and also 3,349 views on YouTube alone. I do have numbers also to include my SoundCloud. I do not have numbers for iTunes, just couldn't find out where to get it from. And I'm still looking for Google Analytics for my actual business. But I do have the SoundCloud numbers, which is 721 uploads, and 721 views on SoundCloud for 2020. So I'm so grateful to everybody that has listened to the podcast, who have shared the podcast, who has just had interest in the podcast. And not only am I going to share about what we have actually done in this year as far as our podcast and our podcast guests, because I definitely want to send a shout out to each one of my podcast guests that I've had this year. And actually, I've had over a total of 35 individuals that shared their story this year with us. And I'm just so grateful for you and all that you have done in your field of becoming resilient, and in your field of becoming great entrepreneurs, in your fields of becoming new speakers, great speakers, in sharing your story, sharing about what gun violence has meant to you and your families, what it's meant to your organization, you as a person, to life coaches that have come on to my show for sharing your input on how to make a difference in life, and what you've done along your grief journey of having lost. Thank you for also coming on and sharing your story. I'm so grateful to me, myself, and I, for showing up this year too. There has been some difficult times due to just life experiences that I've had this year, and also due to COVID, and also just being an entrepreneur and being a new speaker, and getting audiences to be engaged in the topics that I've spoke on this year. I'm going to share a little bit about my year in review and what all I've done is being featured on different platforms this year, and how I've shared my story multiple times. Like I said, we're going to also discuss our great featured guest that came on to the show, and things that I participated in this year. So I thought that was pretty relevant to me doing all the things that I set out for this year. January, I was a facilitator, also a speaker for Jared's Hearts of Success, doing a goal and vision board setting event, and that was just so amazing. I was able to not only create my vision board this year, and a lot of those things did come true in the first couple of months of the year, of even though we had a lot to do this year with when I became Evertown Survivor Network Fellow, and trying to get my story shared on multiple platforms, and getting people to understand a lot more about what gun violence is, and the different types, and just the education behind gun violence, and laws, and speaking to our legislators, and learning a lot more about being with Moms Demand Action, and what that looks like, and the family that I have now come to love and learn more about them, and just the advocates that are also a part of this, that haven't even lost a loved one, but that are so committed to the process of changing lives by advocating, changing laws, getting others to understand how the impact of gun violence have changed so many lives. So I'm so grateful to both of the organizations that have helped me this year, actually help me be more accountable for myself, and accountable to the work that I've committed my life to. And it shows this year, and I'm so grateful. As I looked back, because I was trying to prepare for this episode, and as I was preparing for this episode, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize all that I have done. And I would challenge anybody to do that for yourself. Go back and look at the work that you have done in this year. Even though there has been a pandemic, we have done some great things this year, not only in the gun violence prevention movement, but for ourselves, in our own companies, in our own organizations. And I just want you to look back at, even though this was a difficult year, I still just want you to look back on all the things that you have done, that you didn't even think that you were capable of doing this year in a pandemic. And I just want you to realize that we can do so much with the willpower that we have down on the inside of us, and just showing up for ourselves, and at the same time we're helping so many other people. So I wanted to commit myself to this episode just to say, Miami, job well done. I feel like I've done a lot in this year. I still feel like I have so much more to do, but even in that, I am just grateful for the opportunities that I was allotted through the different programs that I've worked with, the different companies that I've worked with, the different partners that I've worked with this year, the different organizations, grassroots organizations that I've worked with this year. It's been a very difficult year, I must say. I have to also say that it has been, not only has it been challenging, but it has been, for me, the opportunity for me to learn new things about myself, what new things I have to work on. This grief journey is forever evolving for me. So I've learned some things that I thought that I was, that I had been able to adapt, to. But even though we adapt to certain challenges along this process, there's still work to be done underneath the surface. I remember an episode that I did last year with Dr. Virginia Price, and we talked about, what that mountain looks like, and what that healing process looks like, what underneath the surface of the mountain that is above water, and what's below the surface, and what that looks like. And I'm just so grateful that I have embraced both sides. I have embraced what's beneath the surface. But what I've also learned too, if you think about a mountain, and a mountain to me, I would say is all about strength and resiliency. And I was reading earlier today something about a mountain, and it was talking about the strength and also the resiliency. And it stated, even though there's this undercore of the mountain, that's where it's grounded and that's where it's rooted. And I believe just as much as the undersurface of what we don't see when we think about a mountain, that has so much to do with our growth, and the height of the mountain that almost reaches up to the sky. We have some very tall mountains in this world, and I'm just thankful that I have been able to connect with both sides of the good and the bad along my grief journey. So let's get started. So if you have not subscribed to the channel, let me say that again. Please consider subscribing to the channel. I am trying to get my subscribers up. I am trying to get monetized with YouTube. I am continuing to share my message and others' message on all types of loss, no matter if it's divorce, if it's a friendship loss, sibling loss, if it's vacation, if it's holiday. There's so many, there's over 40, I know I've talked about this before, but there's over 40 plus different types of life altering changes that occurs with the human experience. And I would like to share all of those. I want to do more past, the gun violence prevention piece. I want to have others to come on and share their stories as well. So if you would like to be a Grief Nation listener, family member, please go to www.Miami Knight, and that's with a K, that's Miami Knight LLC.com, and go to my Grief Talk. Grief Services. Go to my Grief Services tab, and under that Grief Services tab, you can sign up to be a Grief Talk featured guest. So thank you so much for that. And so stay tuned, you guys. I have so much more in store. Please stick with us and watch our year-end review for Miami Knight LLC, and it's the Miami Knight Show Grief Talk. Thank you. Stay tuned. It's the Miami Knight Show. We'll be right back. A year in review with Miami Knight on It's the Miami Knight Show Grief Talk. In January, I sat down to speak to Ashley K. Pittman as she shared her pregnancy loss story on the episode I Can Breathe Again After Pregnancy Loss. I also spoke to Takesha Jacobs in her city gun violence story of sharing winning for Abdul Bango Cross, losing her son to gun violence, Abdul. In March, I spoke to Charmaine Brown, who is the founder and CEO of Jared Hearts of Success, Inc. In the episode Grief Educators for Justice, she shared her story of losing Jared Brown, her son, to city gun violence. Also, in April, I spoke to Diana Curtis. She's a grief recovery specialist, educator, and coach, and she shared stories of loss, including the story of There's an Art to Living from the Heart. Also, I spoke to Joanne Dean, a professional life coach, entrepreneur, a podcaster, and also a 5-time author, as she shared her stories of loss in the episode Let's Begin Again. I also talked to Javanya Young McDowell in the Remarkable Woman episode, and she shared her story of the unintentional shooting of her son, Jawan McDowell. I spoke with Angela Powell Smith, and she shared her story in the episode A Closer Look at Homicide Survivors after losing her husband, Sergeant Major Randy Smith, to gun homicide. I also spoke to Adriana Pence as she shared her suicide loss story on the episode Sibling Loss for her brother, Luke John Pence. In May, I sat down with Cynthia Freeman, and she shared her story about her son, Danger LaRae Freeman, in regards to a violent crime stabbing. And I also spoke with Olga Williams, and she shared her city gun violence story of Dominique Williams. In the episode Dominique Life Mattered. I sat down with Rachel Maurice as she shared her survivor story of being a mass shooting survivor in the episode Life After a Mass Shooting, and she also shared the loss of her friend during that mass shooting, Randy. In May, I also shared the story of Regina and John Jenkins Jr. in the episode After the Storm, as they shared their city gun violence story of son Trey Devon Lane. In June, I spoke to Tangela Mason Shelby, and she shared her gun violence survivor story for her son, Kimandre Mason, in the episode I Don't Oppose Gun Ownership, Just Be Responsible. Also in June, I spoke back to Ashley K. Pittman, and in a series book co-authoring Don't Struggle in Silence, I Am a Victor series, she shared with 5 other women, Carissa Rosanya, Coretta Fly, Datarsha Davis, Dadriana Williams, Janelle Jones, and Shirley Elise. They shared more pregnancy loss stories. And also in June, I spoke with Howie Furtick, and Howie shared his story, The Journey of Honoring My Father, and the gun homicide of Sheldon Furtick. I also spoke to Andrea Chambly, and she shared the Capital Gazette employee mass shooting, the loss of her husband, John McNamara, in the episode I Am a Warrior, Special Edition Remembering John McNamara. In the episode, I Am the Voice of My Beloved Son, Ahmad Campbell, I sat down with Alicia Campbell, and she shared her story of loss for her son, Ahmad. In August, I talked to Tisha Wack. Tisha shared her story of city gun violence, losing her son, Tyrell Miles, in the episode We Are Their Voices. I also sat down in August with Brian Smith. Brian Smith is a professional life coach, an entrepreneur, a podcaster of Grief to Growth. He's also an author, and he shared his loss story of his daughter, Shanae Smith, with a rare disease called Wolff-Parkinson's white disease. In September, I sat down with Ashley Cohen, who is a 3-time survivor of gun violence. She shared the story of her friend Rob, gun suicide. She also shared the story of gun homicide and being a survivor of a mass shooting. In December, I sat down with Dr. Lorenzo T. Neal in the episode The Daily Impact of Gun Violence as he shares his lost story of losing his mother Sharon and nephew Kevin to gun violence, and also a violent crime stabbing of his brother E-Man. In October, I also spoke to Leslie Washington, and that was Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and she shared her story of being threatened by a gun by her ex-husband. She also shared the story of gun suicide, of losing her cousin Reginald, and city gun violence story of Keith. In December, I spoke to Charmaine Brown, Olga Williams, Javanya McDowell, Nicole Valafane, Renee Williams-Smith in a grief group session. On December the 14th, I remembered the Sandy Hook Elementary mass shooting, and we honored 6 of the school personnel and the 20 students. On December 17th, I honored Keondrick Abrams in episode Remembering Keondrick Abrams, with his mother, Chandra Robinson, grandmother, Latibia McGray, Aunt Latibia Locke, in the city gun violence loss of losing Keondrick Abrams. Also, in December, I spoke with Angela Smith. She is a city gun violence survivor of her late husband, MYRON Smith, in the episode MYRON Should Be Here. So this year, with regards to our mission, which is to educate, empower, and engage our Grief Nation listeners with resources to become transformed through the understanding of the grief process and ways to heal. So ways that we did that this year was I came on and I did different segments in regards to having some playlists so that I could refer clients to, friends to, just giving them an understanding of, what type of work we do, having them listening to the different podcasts, whether they lost someone to city gun violence or whether they lost someone. I have some educational resources that are available to everyone. I have a podcast, which is I have several different podcasts in playlists. There's life-altering changes that causes grief. I have the grief support group. I have my intros. I have different meditations honoring Tyke, Mr. Slugmo Douglas. Also, I have my media features also on my YouTube channel. The In Memory of How Gun Violence Changed Our Life, which is the series on gun violence. And also, like I said, the Grief Talk segments with me, talking about the different types of loss and also the 40 plus type change, life-altering changes. Also in review this year, we did some rebranding. As you can see, our lovely background of the Grief Talk, it's the Miami Night Show Grief Talk studios. We did some rebranding. We did changing of colors. We tried to figure out exactly, I wanted to make sure that I made everything look nice and clean this year. I also did a lot of work with the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention, also getting us ready this year for the virtual walk that we had for the Outer Darkness Walk this year in November. Sorry, I think it was in November. Yeah, November. October this year. That's when we did it. Some other things, I was a guest speaker. Oh, yes, I was a guest speaker this year at the Capitol for our Georgia Moms Demand Action Advocacy Day in March. That was something else that I did this year. Also gave advice to grievers during Mother's Day with Luna Peak, and that was a Mother's Day feature that I did. Shared my story with the Bloomberg campaign this year. Like I said earlier, I became an Evertown Survivor Fellow. What else did we do? It was all kinds of stuff. I really started advocating for myself with my book, but since I am also an author, I really wanted to make sure I kept that in my reels this year because that was on my vision board. I really want to help people with healing and making sure that the key process, A Grief Guide to Mastering Spiritual Healing, was out there and that I continue to share that. I am working on a new book for next year, but I just still in this year really wanted to promote the book. I really wanted to go on a book tour, and I plan to do virtual tours later this year and later next year. But just getting my brand out there was very important to me this year. I'm trying to think of other things that was done. It was so much, but I just wanted to also say, with everything that happened this year, I was capable of getting so many things done. Even losing an uncle to COVID this year, even, having my own issues with my own chronic pain, having to have, sometimes I have to get these shots. I have a bulging disc, I have scoliosis, I have fibromyalgia, and I just really didn't let that stop me. I also discovered, too, you guys, some of the things that I needed to learn about healing for myself. It's not ending. It's, like I said earlier, ever evolving. I still worked on those 7 key grief guides, which is meditation and my diet. I actually changed my diet this year. I'm no longer just plant-based. I also eat fish now. I still studied, mindfulness, and I still don't do as much exercising as I should, but I do a lot more stretching in the mornings. Still practice in my Reiki and energy healing and ancestral healing. I still practice that as a daily practice. And I'm still defining the purpose of me, which I really want to dive more into public speaking. Still get Miami Knight LLC out there. I also this year, yay, graduated in the Masters of Art program, becoming a grief counselor. So that was my year in review, you guys. And I'm so grateful for each of my loyal listeners. And thank you so much, Grief Nation listeners, for being with us for 2020. Bye-bye.
Welcome to Gunson's University 2020. What's up, you guys? I'm Miami Knight.
And I'm Juliana Simone Carrasco.
We are so excited to have you join us. I'm a mother, survivor, survivor membership lead, Survivor Connect mentor, Everytown Survivor Network fellow from DeKalb County, Georgia.
And I'm a Students Demand Action National Advisory Board member from Miami, Florida. We are so excited to kick off Gun Sense University 2020. As we get started, we want to set the tone by sharing our grounding statement. Quisiéramos comenzar este Gun Sense University compartiendo nuestra declaración de intención y propósito. Nuestra intención es de generar una importante presencia de grupos diversos, equitativos e inclusivos a todos los individuos y grupos que decidan unirse a nuestros esfuerzos. Nuestro propósito es trabajar unidos para reducir la violencia con armas de fuego y fortalecer la seguridad pública en nuestro país. En nuestro trabajo, valoramos la diversidad, promovemos la equidad, manifestamos inclusión. Somos una comunidad. Somos sobrevivientes de violencia con armas de fuego, incluyendo víctimas y testigos, promotores de cambios y defensores, y promotores de un futuro libre de violencia con armas de fuego. De vuelta a ti, Miami.
We'd like to begin Gun Sense University by sharing our statement of intention and purpose. Our intention is to foster a robust presence of diversity, equity, and inclusion of and for all individuals and groups choosing to join our efforts. Our purpose is to work together to decrease gun violence and increase public safety across our nation. In our work, we value diversity. We advance equity. We demonstrate inclusion. We are a community. We are gun violence survivors, including victims and witnesses, change makers and advocates who come together in partnership to work toward a future that is free from gun violence.
We're honored to be here today, kicking off Gun Sense University 2020. A big welcome to all my student leaders and advocates. We have grown up in the midst of the gun violence crisis, and I just want to thank you for being a part of this movement, learning and growing by attending Gun Sense University this year, and using your voices to enact change. We know that young people can help turn the tides of gun violence.
Gun Sense University is such a special time for survivors, students, and leaders across our Everytown network to come together, to share, to learn, to be inspired. Thank you for prioritizing this time for our movement. for our leaders, and for ourselves. It's going to be an exciting 2 days. Even though GSU looks and feels different this year, it is fitting that we are meeting in a virtual space. Shannon Watts started a Facebook page over 7 years ago, and look at what it has grown into, one of the largest grassroots movements for gun safety. And without further ado, please welcome Shannon Watts.
Hello, and thank you, Miami and Juliana, for kicking off GSU. And thank you all for being here today.
Slow mo.
He's got me walking that grief walk.
Going slow mo.
He's got me talking that grief talk.
Going slow mo.
He's got me clocking the way.
It's the Miami Knight Show.
Hey, yeah.
Slow mo.
He's got me walking that grief walk.
Going slow mo.
He's got me talking that grief talk.
Going slow mo.
He's got me clocking the way.
What up, tribe? It's Miami Knight, your master grief coach. Welcome to the Miami Knight Show. You got me walking that grief walk. It's time for Grief Talk, y'all.
I talk about things you think about.
It's Miami Knight, your master grief coach.